Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for this opportunity to exchange for media. This is a great, time for all of us to be here and discuss some of the very pertinent points. We've had a pre-discussion, and without really wasting any minute, I'll set the context and dive right in. The topic today that's been given to us is about trust in the time of trolls, building trust and transparency in a time of disinformation. I think one thing that we commonly, all of us agree, is that trolls are like a digital form of stone peddling, which isn't strategic. It's just about heavy loading towards a certain narrative that one wants to build, versus disinformation, if built in a strategic manner, can really influence a narrative. So I would like my panel, happy to go order-wise or however, to really understand what your point of view on troll versus disinformation is, and what does that really mean for a brand reputation from an earned media PR perspective. So over to you, happy for you to add your thoughts, examples as well to this.
Hello, am I audible? It's a brilliant topic in terms of there's so much chatter around trolls, disinformation. I think in one of the forums I had said that trolls doesn't need to be taken seriously. Trolls are trolls. And the real world sits really outside, which is your offline world. And I think if I have to give an example, everyone kind of wrote Congress off in the build-up to the elections. Everyone thought it's gonna be 400 par. And everyone thought there is a Pappu. Everyone knows, there were huge trolls, and Pappu led Congress to 99 seats. So all I will say is that while there's a world which exists in the digital, everyone watches in their free time, leisure time, have a good laugh, at times take inspiration from those reels. But I think I would say India as a country has become much more aware, literate in terms of taking the real decisions. So, coming to, just to summarize from my side, and I'll kind of share the mic to others, I would say that trolls will stay trolls. Real world is very, very different. And we people who are part of a industry where kind of a lot of knowledge exchange, knowledge transfer is happening, we might take trolls more seriously, than the real world.
Great, thank you for that perspective, Aman. I think two things that you've established clearly is that trolls are essentially the non-structured piece of noise more than valuable insight, versus disinformation is something that we may want to discuss further. So your thoughts, Akanksha?
Quite similar actually. So if you look at trolls, I'll not name the cricketer, but the cricketer has been trolled for multiple reasons of late. And he plays a good match and everybody forgets about it. So I think trolls are not that damaging, but yes, when you are a brand, you may have to look at it that, if it is going out of hand, and if it is disinformation plus trolls, you may have to look at it to put out a view of the brand. There are enough and more examples out there of brands like Mamaearth, for an example, was trolled for a incorrect tweet that was put out, and then the founder had to step in and apologize because of the trolls that were there. So I think there is, while trolls generally die out and die their own death, it's important to keep an eye on them when there is a brand involved. From a disinformation standpoint, there's a lot happening with deepfake, with a lot of AI stepping in. So that is something which is a bigger worry for anybody and everybody out there. Because for brands, right, if there could be a deepfake of the PM, deepfake could be of anybody. So brands need to be very mindful and watchful, and hence important to keep an eye on what is happening on the digital world and control it before it goes out of hand.
Great, thank you so much. And that also brings in the conversation of earned media versus owned media here, right? Because there is only as much that you can do in the earned media space versus owned. There's a lot more that can be emphasized. So from that perspective, Manika, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, Thank you, Aman. Thank you, Kansha, for setting the context. I will obviously not repeat what they have, my fellow panelists have already covered, but I would want to emphasize on one point here. Like while we are talking about trolling and disinformation, there's another word which exists, which is misinformation, right? So first we have to understand what is the basic difference between the three, right? Misinformation, obviously all have similar nature, but the intent is very important, especially in our line of communication business. The intent, the purpose, the reasons are very important, and hence it decides on which route to be taken, especially by the specialists like us, right? Because eventually at the end of the day, it's all about repetition management. So while some part is being done with an intent of deceiving reputation or sabotaging reputation of maybe an entity or a person, which is in a form of disinformation or trolling. However, misinformation is, while it's misleading, but may not be done with an intent. So hence, it's easier to control, which is why the brands like Google and search platforms, they are policies which control misinformation, but disinformation, because it's propped up by someone's intent, it's very difficult to control. So, which is why we see the brands like even a small spark. Like morning, I was traveling to this place. I open in shorts. The first is like reject Netflix. Why are we rejecting Netflix? We don't know. But sometimes like reject Netflix just because of an upcoming movie of Junaid, Amir Khan's son, right? So again, it crops a lot of biases, especially very strong biases in terms of culture, in terms of religion, which cause hatred. So yeah, so trolling is a menace, and disinformation still with an intent of deceiving is being done. Again, it's it's a menace for an expert like us, communication fraternity. Yeah, misinformation is something which can be ignored and neglected.
That's wonderful. That's a very, very important distinction that you've created for all of us, that there is a distance between trolls, misinformation, disinformation, identifying all of that, seeing what's the repercussion on various stakeholders and the brand per se, what do policies really say about it, and what are the possible tactics that we have to deal with it is something that's very important for us to evaluate before we act on it. So over to you, Gitika, now with this context set. From a PR perspective, what do you think are some of the upcoming strategies, and especially with the whole digitization, AI, technologies, too much information in our face, how do we navigate this treacherous terrain?
Thanks, Garima. Definitely my fellow panelists, Aman, Manika, and Akanksha. You heard them talking about misinformation, disinformation, trolls. We all know about it. We have been living through this day in and day out. Brands see it, be it even a simplest of a freelancer or a PR person or even an influencer actually goes through it. But how do we curb it? So to your question, Garima, I think 3 big points that I would like to put across the table here. First, we need to be clear on what we are saying. The more clear, the more transparent we are, not concealing or hiding any kind of information, it definitely adds to your credibility, whether you are a brand, whether you are a freelancer, as an individual, it takes your credibility to at least 2 notches above of what you are existing right now. Second point that I would like to put across is be very, very consistent. The moment you break your communication with your audience, and skepticism starts. People start thinking, they start speculating, your audiences start speculating, kuch to gadbad hai. So now, Daya, kuch to gadbad hai. So not that way, but yes, that means that the other party is trying to conceal some information. We should never ever break that consistency of communication with your audience. It always helps to maintain those bridges between you and your audience. Third, be absolutely authentic, fact-checked information. The more information which has been validated at the back end and comes across on the table, the more your audience, your customers, your consumers, they get that trust factor more and more in you. And it goes a very, very long way, especially with brands. So that's what my 3 points would here
Great.
be.
No, very wonderfully said, because the whole discussion is around truth and trust, right? So the 3 points that you've mentioned, which is clarity, consistency of communication, and the authentic, highly validated, fact-checked information is going to serve the purpose, right? So while that will definitely help us create a context and content. Achal, coming to you, would you like to share some thoughts on the mediums in which this can be dissipated? There was a wonderful example that you were sharing with us earlier, so I'd love for you to add to that.
So, really happy to be here at this forum and, being a part of this very key narrative, because we all battle it, especially as communication professionals. I think this is something that plagues all our lives, professional lives, and even personally, I think some of us have seen others being trolled or have also been a part of trolling. I think, before I come to the examples, just very quick perspective on trolling. I was thinking very hard about it, thanks to the conversation that Garima and I were having yesterday on this topic. I think trolling is becoming synonymous with talking, and that's super dangerous. Because what's happening is that, talking is all about expressing yourself, sharing your point of view, and at times trolling gets confused with popular opinion. While I agree with Aman that it's not, it's far from reality and may or may not have that end impact as we envisage it to be, or what the trolls are trying to do. But the fact is there are a lot of people whose minds do get influenced by trolls negatively. So I think trolls are a harsh reality. It is not something specific to India, politics, or it's all over the globe, right? So it's something that I think is a harsh reality of today's world, of democracies, of the onslaught of social media, AI. Trolls are here to stay. I think what we need to really do is, like I think some of my panel members said here, is to have very, very clear barriers in what comprises of trolls vis-a-vis accurate information and what is misinformation. So I think having that understanding is super important, especially for us, because we are brand custodians in our own right. In terms of just one example of trolling, which I want to share, by the way. And I'll do this super quickly. There's a journalist who I follow, who's very, very famous in the entertainment world. He's an editor, and he interviews a lot of celebrities, and he has a different choice. He's made a different choice in terms of his, sexuality. And what I saw is that, lately he's been getting massively trolled on Instagram. And people have been like, the trolls are at him. And what I liked is that he didn't ignore them or choose to like just shut them down, but he actually kind of showed up in a very nice way, where he's putting up videos where he's taking the trolls head on and actually, educating people. While he's of course defending himself, he's educating people about, how, this trolling can actually impact the psyche of so many millennials and people out there. So I think as media, as influencers, and as people who are in this fraternity, it is also our added responsibility to ensure that we do that segregation from, wheat from the chaff. So I think that's super important. Coming to specific examples, I have had the opportunity to work with different segments. And one very interesting thing I saw a brand like Amazon do in India is that, Amazon gets, because of it being a global MNC and it being seen as an e-commerce giant trying to eat into lion shares of business of, the Kirana stores, etc. They've been at the ire of the government, the small retailers, and, also a lot of trolling online. A lot of that times that is propaganda. They're not real trolls. But I think what has really helped Amazon in India is to have its own source of truth, which is the Amazon India blog. Now that blog today has all the correct, authentic information on Amazon. It's not just like a directory. It also has a lot of stories on how Amazon is making a wide impact across India. So I think Amazon has, being a behemoth, it has the leverage to build on that platform. But I think that platform now gets more footprint than, a lot of news media sites, and has become like the go-to for media as well. So that has helped Amazon dispel a lot of myths against itself. Another thing I want to add is that, myth busting is something every brand needs to do, because there is so much misinformation around categories. So for example, now I work for pet care and I see so many myths against pet nutrition. Again, all of these are motivated. But I think it's very, very important for all of us to use our own handles, our own presence to do a lot of myth busting. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Great, Anshul. Really thankful for a very holistic, so it's like just the right thing to do. Like at the end of this, she's been able to sum it, and she's made my job easy by, putting all of that together so beautifully. But I think one thing that I took away very specifically from what Anshul just said is that as brands who are willing to really go out there and build reputations, be willing and ready to call them out and be willing and ready to be called out, right? If there is a troll out there, if there's disinformation, stand up there, raise your hand, say this is what it is, but at the same time be ready to be called out as well, right? And that's how you'll be able to dissipate a lot of information there. I'd love to invite your point of view in a very quick 30 to 40 second or a minute at best, and then we'll get to closures because just a time check, we're about 12, 13 minutes more to go, right? So yes, Gitika, I can see you like really wanting to make a point here.
Yeah,
And
thanks,
then Manika
Garima.
will be
Yeah.
next.
So just adding to what Achal just mentioned, and when we are talking about examples, and of course, Manika put up a very amazing point about how do we actually differentiate between trolls, misinformation, and disinformation. Everything all said and done, I personally would like to put up as a communication custodian that yes, do whatever, but we have to follow ethics. And I would like to put up an example here. Will not take any brand's name, but one of the brands, of course, decided a few years back they would like to shut down one of their very important and actually revenue generation business. But due to some laws, regulations, and especially in healthcare, we all are aware that medical device industries, especially in India and across the globe, we have FDA's, Indian medical laws. There are a lot of restrictions that to what extent we can talk about the product, do marketing or PR around it. So as a result, one of the brands, they decided that they would have to shut down the operations manufacturing of one particular product. Whereas they put up an official document or press release out of it. However, the competition, not even thinking about once, they just pick up that press release and put it on their official website as a competition. They're okay, our competition is now going down the drain. It's high time that now we pull up our sales. So but the reason that why I'm bringing this example here is, do whatever we want to do, but let's maintain our ethics.
let's
in
be
the
rooted in,
industry of communications,
yeah.
let's do that. Yeah.
Yeah, ethics and integrity is super critical. Do you want to add something quickly and then we...
Yeah, correct. So what Achal and Geetika had just summed up, I would just like to add as brand custodians, as communication experts, it's just not our responsibility to distinguish, but to educate. Okay, so education is also like creating awareness, like right kind of awareness is a direct slap to what we call trolling, because trolling has no other answer, right? Trolling, you cannot stop trolls, you cannot avoid it. Best is you can ignore them, but then if you really want to take it head on, the best way is to create a content which is your superpower to beat something which is like a villain to you. So yeah, the hero is your content, hero is in you, and the villain is out there, so you should know how to beat that villain.
That's wonderful, Manika. You've really added a very nice flavor to this conversation right as we are about to conclude it, that as brand custodians, our game is not to just defend, but to play on the front foot and really go out there and change the narrative, if that's what's important, right? Education, awareness, and everything. So right at the end, if we have to close this with 30 to 60 to 90 seconds at best each, what is that one thing or two things at best that integrated PR communication can really do to turn the tables on this entire conversation of gray conversation and getting into a place where it's favorable for our brands, our clients, ourselves, and serve the larger narrative?
I didn't touch upon actually misinformation and disinformation in my first engagement with the audience. And I want to talk about it because I feel that's the more dangerous bit. That needs to be busted instantly. You can't wait there to you can't be late or delayed in response. That can actually do a lot of damage to your brand. And I think, that's the difference between trolls and disinformation and misinformation. And disinformation and misinformation can be a lot more strategic. It could be competition-led. It could be led by certain people who might be your internal stakeholders also. It could be anyone who has a grudge or wants to pull you down.
So basically, you're saying that there is an intentional effort behind it which needs to be identified to
Exactly.
tackle it.
Exactly, and I think that's where a lot of, myth busting through facts need to be there, and that's where I feel we have a much more bigger role, and it's much more integrated because you might have to, if you have to see the kind of the volume of this misinformation, disinformation, you just can't do it alone via, engaging with the journalists. You
Right,
might
so an
have to do even-
integrated effort, including all forms of media and taking it head on and strategically working on it.
Exactly,
Cool.
and I think you look at what happened to, say, Maggie, you know. Uh, I don't know whether the audits were right or wrong, whatever happened, but what happened to their brand and how they pulled it back, they needed a lot more integrated effort. And you can't say PR did it alone or advertising did it alone or editorial or whatever. A lot of damage had been done. So I'll just say that. And what was your question?
I think you've answered it by telling us that, one thing that we all need to gun for is an integrated effort where all kinds of arms and legs of PR and marketing come together and win the game. I'm just mindful of time. We've got about
Yeah.
8 minutes to go.
I think
So,
I'll give it to Akansha.
yes, thank you.
So to kind of sum it up, I will just give the example of my own organization. We've been through a big crisis. There was a lot of misinformation, disinformation over the last couple of years. I would not put a lot of trolling, but of course, misinformation, disinformation. And there are few things that worked very well for us. First, of course, like Achal also very rightly pointed out, owned media strategy to kind of put out our narrative out there. We realized that we're fighting with something which is just being created, which may not be true. So we have to be up the game. We have to uh, kind of catch the bull by its horns, get our narrative right. So that the own media strategy worked well, where we actually got our customers or our merchants to be our custodians who came and spoke about the experience, who came and spoke about how we're making impact. So that really worked to kind of build back the trust and the reputation of the brand. Also, of course, we use the social media channels very effectively to put out facts, because facts are very important in such situations, and it's important to put out there what is the real pictures. We used our social handles. We also used our leadership really well, used their social influence to put out the views. And also, interestingly, we always kept our employees close to us. So we ensured that they served as brand advocates for us and pushed and propelled the positive narrative out on the social channels, which in turn helped us to kind of build that surround sound when it comes to talking about the brand, what we want to do, what is our brand purpose, and not just get deflected. We ensure we don't get deflected with what the misinformation or disinformation is trying to take us to. I think that works well.
Great, Akanksha. Thank you so much. So very quickly, there are 3 things that you pointed out, essentially. 1, act swiftly. Keep your evangelists and advocates close. And be clear about what you want to communicate and then amplify it through whatever channels that suit best. Great. Thank you so much. Manika.
Yeah, so I think these frameworks, what I think Geetika also touched upon, Akansha also touched upon, says the same language, like you call it 3C framework or 4C framework. It's all about clarity, it's all about content, it's about data collection, it's about communication, and it's about like communication on both fronts, right? Internal communication and external communication, and obviously the changing the narrative as you progress. So basically, for me, the clarity in your thoughts and exactly what you are up against is the solution to the problem. So yeah, I think clarity is the keyword.
No,
for me.
that's great. You've added a very good point there, that because these narratives are not static, they evolve over a
changing,
period of
yes.
time. Therefore, tracking it
And then
closely from all angles
evolving your own
possible,
strategy.
ensuring there are no blind spots there, and then maneuvering your strategies accordingly
Correct.
is very, very important. So that's a great addition to the whole buffet and bouquet of options that we can avail from. Gitika.
I think we've covered it all almost. Just one point from my side. When we talk of the 3 C's framework, one of the C's stands for consistency, and I mentioned it earlier as well. Consistency not just in communicating, bridging that gap with your consumers, but also consistency in the kind of messaging that needs to go out from the brand. Language needs to be the same. For people inside the organization or even your internal stakeholders, employees, when we take them as our brand ambassadors, they are our first ambassadors. Everyone needs to talk the same language. So that brand messaging, as the as the communication custodians, that messaging has to be very, very sharp.
Yeah, basically the hammering approach of essentially making sure that no points is missed. Achal, my dear friend, is a great synthesizer. So I'm sure she'll sum up all of this and make my job easier.
Just one thing I wanted to kind of add, when we were speaking about trolling and, misinformation earlier, a lot of times brands tend to leverage it. Huh? They're trolling each other and they think it's smart. So I think why I'm bringing this back is because I think ultimately my personal takeout is, and then something that I've also been a lot of opinion makers and media talking about is how we really need to have the truth army versus the troll army, right? And who will be the truth army? It's going to be all of us, a lot of us in this room. It's also going to be brands who need to be really really responsible, have their own channels in place. And I think also something that we did at Amazon which really helped us. At times the brand speak is not enough, right? Because the trolls are big in number. The trolls a lot of times have the public support or whatever. They have good penetration within certain set of people. I think it's very also important to build that ecosystem voice which says the same narrative. So, for example, at Amazon, we had a lot of allies who were benefiting from e-commerce. They could be the small sellers, the rural folks, some people in the government who believe in the future of e-commerce. We got them all together to come about, how e-commerce actually enables the economy, and there's no shying away from it. And there's no business today that thrives without e-commerce, right? So I think similarly, when today we look at pet care, there's a lot of misinformation happening through, small brands, big brands, but it's very, very important to bring that voice of reason. And that we do through doctors and veterinarians. So I think very important to have that ecosystem, find its way to kind of break this whole trolls, because ultimately they are dangerous and they can have an impact on reputation, on people and on lives. Thank you.
That's great, Anshul. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for adding some really brilliant points. I know at times these conversations become repetitive, yet thinking through and bringing in that important point that's crucial, right? I think most often than not, this kind of communication, which is about trolling or disinformation or misinformation, turns into a crisis. And I think all of us mutually agree that we can follow like one formula, IIM. Identify first what's happening, isolate it from the reputation that you're supposed to guard and secure, and then look at managing it, right? Don't let it become a pot boiler of multiple truths and fakes and rights and wrongs. As a communicator, as a crisis communicator, all the more, you need to be very sharp about what exactly are the pain points, should be able to pick them up, figure out how deep the cuts and the wounds are, and then be able to balm it with different kind of narratives that we've discussed here. And here, the context, the content, and the messenger, everybody is equally important. And we, as communicators, are the force behind it, right? So kudos to the great thoughts that you could table. I'm so proud of ourselves. We've concluded it 1.5 minutes early, Mr. Bhatia. So any last thoughts anybody wants to add? Because I think that's my job was to synthesize all of it, and you've done that so beautifully.
I just wanted to add one more example of, just to make it for everyone to kind of connect to it. I think recently there were massive big tech layoffs, right? And everyone read about it. Some of us, some of us, our friends, were also impacted by it, unfortunately. And again, there were these trolls at work, right? What is the motivation behind these layoffs? What's the impact, etc., etc. Of course, there were few impacted people also who were kind of sharing their grief and their grievance against companies who were doing this. But at that point in time, I saw a lot of employees come up as custodians and try and actually help the ones who were facing the crisis, and actually demystify what this really means and why the companies themselves are witnessing a downturn, and that's a positive, basically a way to kind of see this, because it then happened eventually with many, many more industries. A COVID is another example, I think, where there was misinformation, disinformation, and trolling as well. And I think, again, there was a truth army amongst the normal people who were trying to help each other. So I think it's practical to still differentiate the source of truth from trolling.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anshul.